Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pianist Academy. I'm Charles Szczepanek. It's great to see many of you here. I know Rhodesy was in the chat super early. I don't know if you're still here, Rhodesy, but welcome. Benlington Groomer, great to see you. Jeff, great to see you. Alex, hey. Alex, it's been a while since I've seen you on a live stream. So wonderful to have you back. We have a bunch of other people here, so feel free. Please say hello. Drop your name in the chat. Bethany, hello, Bethany. Antonio, OCD King, there, everybody. All right, David, welcome, David, and Julio. Awesome. We have an exciting class today. C Drive, good morning, C Drive. I'm not sure if we've seen you before. If we haven't, welcome. If it's your first time. Yeah, we have an exciting class. 2 pieces by Chopin, including one of the. Well, all of the Chopin etudes are difficult, but of them, one of the most difficult ones, I'd say, we're going to take a look at. It's a submission by, I'm just going to call him Zero. I know he sent this to me about a month ago, and I've been trying to get in touch, so I hope Zero is here today. And if he's not live, I hope he checks out the replay, because we're listening to him play about the first half of Chopin's Opus 25, number 12, the last etude of both sets. After we do that, we're going to listen to Julio, who is definitely here. We're going to listen to Julio play another selection of Chopin's the Prelude number 6 in B minor. And I also got a question from Antonio. Antonio, I saw your question. I didn't have a chance to respond, but we will take a look at that third up today. And then hopefully we'll still have time and we can open it up for questions. Why don't we jump right in, since there's a whole lot to talk about. C Drive, you say you're learning Chopin's Cantabile. Wonderful. How's that going? And who else? You know, since this is a Chopin kind of day, what other can you people that have played Chopin before that are here? What is your favorite of Chopin's? Drop that in the chat. And what is the most difficult of Chopin's that you have played? And I'll start us off. I think my favorite would be Chopin's Second Sonata. I love that piece. The final movement drives me bonkers. It's so short and hard. And gosh, the most difficult thing, I think the most difficult thing to perform that I've played is probably the Etudes Opus 10 number 1. Getting that really great in front of an audience is incredibly hard. So, let us know if you're thinking. I hope you're thinking. Alex says your favorite Chopin, the first Ballade in G minor. Bethany's favorite is Mazurka, Opus 17, number 4. Antonio's is the second concerto, but you would never think about playing it. Hey, maybe selections, Antonio. Maybe bits and pieces of it at some point, right? You know, one of my favorite concertos of all time is Rachmaninoff's Second, and the first thing I did when I picked up the piece was learn my favorite little bars, which are some of the easier ones. They're the more lyrical ones. So that's always a possibility. We could jump in with that. All right, awesome. Great to hear that from everybody. Let's jump over and listen to Zero playing about the first half-ish of Chopin's Etude, Opus 25, number 12, the Ocean Etude. And then we'll have a chat about it. Susan, welcome, Susan. You're working on Polonaise in G minor. Awesome. Great to hear. Internet Privacy, welcome. And yours is the fourth Ballade. That's a lovely piece. That was my main teacher in college. His favorite Chopin piece was the fourth Ballade. And he definitely recorded it as well. Awesome, Benlington Groomer. Chopin's Bach roll in F sharp. Wonderful. Let's jump over and listen to Zero. Awesome. Great stuff. Let's give Zero a round of applause. If he's here, he would have said hello. So hopefully he checks this out later and he checks out our comments. So round of applause for Zero. Internet Privacy said impressive. Bedlington Groomer, dang, that's awesome. Antonio, nice with the low piano angle. Yeah, that's cool. Yes, Bethany, I do too. I love that drop into major. Awesome. All right, let's dive into how we can make that better. So Chopin etudes, right? They can teach us a whole lot about technique and various very particular technical approaches to things. This is obviously a study in arpeggiation and in repeated notes. So having thumb and five change position, right? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think the only time great speed in the etudes is really necessary is if you're competing with them or playing them for professionally, let's say in a concert setting. We can learn things by continuing to push the tempo, but I think the most important thing to discover is where is the tempo that we can currently, where's our limit? How fast can we currently play the technique that Chopin is having us work on and play it very cleanly? And we should try to stick with that tempo and only push faster as we're able to and as we try to nudge our technique better and better by little bits. So for example, Zero, I heard really nice like fluidity, nice fluidity in the hands, nice movement. We're not getting locked up. We're not too tense. Everything looks really nice. It sounds like it's a little too fast for you. And I can hear that because a lot of the inner notes between the bottom and the top are not in sync between the two hands. So we have a lot of things that are close, but then in the middle, they'll be slightly off. And at great speed, I think a lot of people wouldn't notice that, but we're not trying to please a lot of people, right? We're trying to play this the best we possibly can. So Zero, if we slow the tempo down to the point where all of that stays incredibly crisp. So maybe start with a very slow tempo, something that's significantly slower than what you just did, which I think was around maybe like half note equals 60 or so. The score, I'll show it in a second. The score Chopin recommends or requests half note equals 80, which is a feat. There aren't even many people that actually play it that fast. Maybe Pellini is one of them. But if we start significantly slower than that, so pick something that is easy. Make sure all of those inner notes line up for every arpeggio, measure after measure after measure after measure. Then let's nudge our tempo. So let me actually do this for you. Ironically, I was having a discussion. I haven't seen Christopher here, but he usually jumps in on the live streams. I was having a discussion with Christopher the other week, separate from this, and he called this doing tempo laddering. I've never heard that term before, but I like it. So starting off at one tempo and then increasing, nudging our way up and up and up. So here's 60. I hope everybody can hear that. Let's play 60. Okay, if we can accomplish that, can we go faster? By 4 or 5. Internet privacy 60 is pretty fast. It is a little fast. I'm going to show you so that we don't have to go through too many iterations. My tempo is going to break at some point pretty quickly here. When it breaks, that's what I'm talking about, where we don't want to practice faster than that. So I'm going to show you what happens when I get to that point, because while I did somewhat prepare to play this today, it's not all that heavily practiced. So here's 65. So I can already feel that that is starting to be a little bit quick for me. I bet if I go 5 faster, I'm going to start losing consistency in those inner voices. So this is now 70 for the half note. So that wasn't as consistent as I'd like it to be. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time practicing at that tempo. I would spend more time practicing just a hair under that tempo and making sure it's really crisp and that we can articulate every single note. Speaking of articulation, let's talk through a couple different ways we can practice this. And I think these are also going to be able to apply to various other things, depending on the circumstance. But let's talk about the thing that I think helps me the most. We'll start with that. And that is actually feeling like, one, that it doesn't have to be so aggressive. The strength of the dynamic and the forte and the accent, that's going to come out more naturally as we get more comfortable. But I like to focus on letting the arms be supportive and the hands, they're not hanging in the sense that if they truly hang, they're very relaxed and there's no support here. But they're hanging in the sense that there's no excess tension. I'm not gripping, right? But I'm also not letting them rest on the key surface. So having the hands just above the keys and now trying to play with as little pedal as possible, which you already heard, and play mostly from the bridge down to the fingertip. What happens is we get like a detached sound. And it's very light. That lightness is one of the most important things because no matter how fast we push and no matter how much strength we try to inject into the big moments, the whole thing needs to stay relaxed. Otherwise, we're gonna cause some issues. We're gonna run out of steam by 30 seconds in or a minute in, and we have 2 to 2.5 minutes that we have to continue to play. Internet Privacy says, what tempo was that? Maybe 56, 57, something like that, to the half. This is incredibly slow. But it's slow enough that every single finger is articulated at exactly the same time, and the technique, everything is as relaxed as possible. So that is a tempo for me. We would want to find that for what that tempo is for you, 0. And it might change depending on your comfort level with different parts of the piece. For example, when we got into A flat, you weren't quite as comfortable as you were in C minor earlier. Hello, Mark. And it's partly maybe due to the amount of time spent practicing. Maybe if you do a lot of practicing starting from the beginning, but not from the middle, we don't get to A flat as often in the subsequent bars, right? And also, coming up beyond that, there are some probably the most awkward positions for the left hand. Those are going to come up a little later in the piece. So there are all kinds of places here. There are all kinds of cadence points where we can start to practice, right? Based almost every 8 bars. Of course, there's the beginning. And then we have after this, it repeats almost like the beginning, but it goes somewhere else. C major. So that would be another spot to play. Internet Privacy, it's actually still not fast enough at that tempo. The slowest tempo that I prefer is about 76 or 77, which would be, I'll try. I have not practiced it well enough to be able to play it at that tempo. But if I were to perform it, that is the tempo that I would be shooting for. Slower than that, I don't think the whole thing, not every bar needs to be that tempo, and we're going to get into talking about that. But that, if it's a professional performance, I don't think it can really be any slower than that because it becomes far too easy of a piece. Okay. So, Zero, we're talking about breaking things up into different places to practice so that when we get toward the middle of the piece and we have different hand positions, we're going through different arpeggiations, sometimes from black keys, sometimes from white keys on the bottom, like this one, to a black key with the thumb in the left. That's one of the most awkward ones in the whole piece, and that would be one to just take that measure and practice it, right? Let's rewind a little bit because I got ahead of myself. So we were talking about the technique of playing detached, nice and slowly. If you want to, throw that accent in on the thumb that's written. Right? Okay. The other things, the other types of practice that you could think about. Groupings. And let's try to group this in two ways. The one that I prefer the most, and that is the most challenging, is to take our first note and link it to the first note of the next shift in hand position. So from the first note of the piece, so that would be one great thing. We can go through the entire thing, the entire piece, every bar, and that shift, that rhythm that we're creating is helping us to practice the really fast shift from 5 in the right up to thumb on the same pitch. That's one of the hardest things to execute. Right? Same thing in the left hand, from 1 Yes. I'm just reading through Internet Privacy's comments. He says, forget the professional performance. That takes time. It absolutely does. It would take a great pianist months of at least an hour a day to get it really nice at a professional level tempo. That's just how difficult, and that applies to all of the etudes. So I don't think, if that's not your purpose, we don't have to do that. And that really goes back to kind of the first thing I said, that speed is not, for me, if I would be ripped apart if I played this in a concert. I can't get away with that. But if that's not the purpose for you, and you're not, for example, like selling tickets or something like that, and you're playing this for fun and to learn the technique and for friends, and maybe you're playing it in a recital, or maybe you're playing it even for like a diploma in one of the, in RCM or another testing program, it does not have to be 70 to 80 beats per minute. It can be much slower and be really, really successful and wonderful. Okay, second type of grouping practice. Taking everything in one hand position and playing through that position very quickly. Something like that, and going through all of the bars that way as well. All of these little groupings give us time to recollect our thoughts and really make sure that we're continuing to execute all of the notes as cleanly as possible. Notice, even though I'm taking these groupings now very quickly, all of those inner notes played with, for example, like 2 and 1 in the left, they are still articulating perfectly cleanly and perfectly with the right hand. So don't take a speed faster than you can create that articulation, create that cleanliness. So if it's Even if it's slower, that's just fine. Okay, let's wrap up the technique talk about it and shift gears into talking about Chopin's etudes can all be extraordinarily musical pieces. And our technique needs to be such, I cover technique first because it has to be such that at least the tempo that we choose, we have choices about how we can shape phrases. Well, internet privacy isn't the point of improving to get to the next level. And probably for a lot of people, the point of improving is to be able to perform it somewhere. So I think they go hand in hand. There's no point in spending any time working at something if you don't have a desire to make it better, right? So if that's not it, then, he played it just fine the way it was. But since it's already quite good, we have to talk about what comes next, what comes after that. Okay, musicality. The thumb in the right hand has most of what's going on in this piece, most of what is musical, right? I haven't shown anybody the score yet, but let's throw that up. So here we are. The melody truly exists down here. And until we get to the stem up notes, a handful of bars in. Sorry, stem down notes. This first note of every bar is what we want to bring out and what we want to use to show phrase. So the phrase is... That's part of the reason why truly the piece needs to go at least at a certain tempo in order to hear that connection. Because if it's too slow, these all sound like separate events instead of a linked phrase, right? So if we do actually play it at 80, which is what Chopin marked, right? That's obviously we get a great sense of phrase when we do that. Now, if we slow it down so we can actually play everything, let's think about what is the shape? This isn't just loud, 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 loud every strike. I don't enjoy performances, even from professionals. I don't enjoy professional performances that just pound out every single note. Like that, or faster and so on. I think we lose the point of what Chopin really wrote. So, this is a resolution, and then a departure, and then a further departure, and then a biggest resolution of the phrase. And almost a counter melody that comes in with those other pitches. So, if we think about singing it, there is a shape there that begins with the first bar and somewhat crescendos all the way to F. That is at the beginning of bar 3, and then releases into bar 4. And then we begin again. Great. Okay, that's our first phrase. The second phrase starts very much the same way. And I think a great choice would actually be to echo the first phrase instead of playing out just as strongly again in measure 9 down here. instead of going back and hammering E flat, which doesn't leave us as far to go dynamically, emotionally, musically, as if we say, can we come back and can we use this decrescendo? And this is truly a decrescendo, I think, not necessarily a tempo mark by Chopin, or a rubato mark. Sometimes he uses those hairpins in that way, right? This is truly a softening. So then can we begin measure 9 more like piano or mezzo piano instead? And then when we reach major, we have something to say. We can actually bring that out if we start. Right? Okay. And then we can continue to grow from there. So I think it's really a neat idea to begin with piano and mezzo piano when we take this phrase over again. It's much harder to execute that way, but I think the musical result is far nicer. Yeah. And then we can continue if we leave enough, let's say, gas in the tank, that when we go to the next page and we reach this big conclusion here in measure 15 where we're really in C major and we get an extra octave of arpeggiation, then we really actually get to explore the grandeur of that bar. And it's not as obscured by everything else being too similar throughout, right? So this is another thing that we can definitely work on if we take it a bit more slowly. So slowly enough to work on all that technique we talked about, and also slowly enough if I take from the second time. Arrival. Sorry about those notes. Right? I'm very glad, Zero, that it seems like you are playing the correct note here in bar 16. And subsequently, I'll show you when we get later in the A flat section. Some editions are printed where this is, I believe that's the note. Yes, some editions have an F printed here instead of a G. That is not correct. It should be a G. So I'm very glad that you got that. It is a G. So looking later on the page, first bar, last bar of the page, this is the first, measure 23, I'm leading into it. C, lower B. This is the same thing sequenced in a different key. And right here, this is an E, and some editions have D flat printed, which is incorrect. So if other people are tuning in that are playing this, we want to be sure that we're playing those pitches correctly because there are misprints that have existed for 200 years about those two bars. Great. I think that covers everything that I really wanted to talk about with this. Let's sum all that up because everything that we talked about we can still apply to other pieces that we work on. So anytime we have a technical challenge, which this entire etude is, slow it down to the point where we can crisply, articulately play every single note in as comfortable and relaxed of a manner as possible. The only time we should increase the tempo is to test ourselves and to see how well we're learning something. So, and that's not by much, right? So if let's divide hypothetically our practice time. If we have an hour to work on this piece, let's say, at least 45 minutes of the hour are going to be practiced at that tempo, should be practiced at that tempo that's extremely clean and controlled. 15 minutes might even be a lot, but over the course of an hour, I can see it adding up. If every 10 minutes or so, you take a pass through 8 bars or 16 bars, and you push the tempo 10% higher, 10 to 20% higher, enough that it pushes us beyond that breaking point that we found at the beginning, but not so fast that it's simply impossible, fast enough that it becomes a challenge, right? Take that tempo, find that point, test yourself for a couple bars. If you play through 2 bars and it's an absolute disaster, don't go through and finish 16 because you set out to finish 16. Just be aware of what you're doing, reflect on it, and say, this is still far too fast. I'm going to back the tempo up, and I need to put more time in at the slower tempo. While we're taking all that time at the slower tempo, use the groupings methods that we talked about. Use those to help increase your tempo in various ways, because that's going to pay off far more quickly than just trying to bump the metronome up and play with it. Rozi, I don't know offhand the tempo for the Waterfall Etude. I know that some of Chopin's tempo marks in the Etudes are incredibly fast. Faster pretty much almost than anything that you hear today. This score, which is the Polish National Edition, is marked at half note equals 80, which is crazy fast. I still have not heard, even the fastest concert pianists don't play it quite that fast. Some other editions list it at 76 for the half note. Rosie, you're saying 160, 176. That's about right. If that's a quarter note BPM, then it's very similar. And something I didn't mention. Internet, I agree with that. Goals, I think they're goals, yes. You say Sokolov played it at full speed. I'll have to look that up. And Bethany, very true. Yes. The actions of Chopin's piano were about half or so, at least according to what I've read. They were about half of what we experience on the modern piano. And so, actually, this is an interesting point, and I'm going to tie it back together with what I brought up. The Chopin's intention might have been part of the practice that I showed earlier, which was relaxed and playing from the large knuckle down, because simply that finger action with the arms carrying the hands around would have provided at least mezzo forte or forte sound on Chopin's piano, and it is barely piano on the modern grand. So in that sense, it's far more difficult, and the etudes are more difficult than even Chopin intended today. Yeah, internet privacy, I think I agree and I disagree, because I don't know, and I haven't heard from Zero today, but I don't know what his goals are. So, for example, and I say this sometimes to people around the channel in comments in various places, but like if there is someone watching who wants to compete or wants to, and they can't yet, they're not able to, they're not at the level they desire to be, or they want to perform, or they want to get a degree, then you absolutely have to hold yourself to a higher standard than you can currently achieve in order to take those steps to get there. Now, if that's not your goal, realize what your goals are, and then we can enjoy working on the piece, and we can enjoy bettering our technique in all of the same ways, and we don't have to torture ourselves with extended months to get that final 5%, that a concert artist needs to have on stage. Internet, I can't set the goals for any. I mean, if they're my student, I can. But I can't. I can't without talking to them. And that's the hard thing about teaching any of this online, is that everybody's in a different place. And what I have taught, for example, the same pieces to a number of different students, and most of them, I've never taught the same piece the same way. It really depends on who they are and what they respond to and what their goals are, right? So yeah, a person has to set it for themselves. Yeah. Rhodes asks about believing the half beat and full beat theory. I don't buy into that. I do think that metronomes were less consistent than they are today. The half beat theory that I've explored makes things incredibly slow. One of the things that I have said when I've talked with people about that in the past is if you truly play, and I don't think half beat applies to Chopin. It would be prior to Chopin's time. But if you really take, for example, like Beethoven sonatas and you apply the half beat theory and you even if you cut Beethoven's tempos in half or even by a third, they become so extraordinarily slow that the challenge, the technical challenge they present is far, far from how we train to play them today. And the issue that I've brought up with that is we can't go in history from Beethoven and have, relatively speaking, easy tempos in Beethoven's music and then play Chopin and Liszt 20 years later or 50 years later, a couple generations, and all of a sudden have these massive virtuosic leaps. It just doesn't seem like history would work that way. It would be stepwise, and maybe, yes, Liszt and for like Paganini were extraordinary musicians, and they increased the demands exponentially when they came around. But that doesn't mean everybody else around them was relatively incompetent. I don't think that would be the case. And if half-beat theory kind of would claim that is the case, it just seems like that is highly unlikely if we think about it from a technical point of view. Bedlington Groomer, half-beat theory is that the metronome marking on the page, I don't fully know all of the history, but that the metronome marking on the page would actually be 2 swings per the note per the number written, not 1. And so, based on our modern metronome and how we count with modern beats, it would be half the tempo. I'll sum it up and leave it there because I haven't truly looked into history well enough to explain it any better than that. Yeah, Rhodesy, that would be interesting to hear. So, okay, I think we've come a long way with this. I think we've learned a lot. I think that, let me just hammer home one more thing, and that would be, no matter what it is we're playing, we're going to make so much more progress if we don't exceed the tempo that we're currently capable of for 90 to 95% of our practice. I do find taking 5% of the time and pushing ourselves does unlock things that get stuck otherwise. But if we spend too long trying to push the tempo, Rhodesy, I'm looking at you right now. If we spend too much time pushing tempo and not enough time working on consistency of articulation, we end up creating holes where when we try to slow down, it's still not consistent. And this reminds me of, if someone knows who actually said this, I think my teacher was quoting it, but sometimes I'd walk into lessons when I was a teenager and my teacher would tell me after I played, pedal covers a multitude of sins. And he could hear, that I was just jamming the pedal down to blur everything so that all those little inconsistencies they didn't show. But that also goes back to when practicing this piece and other things, there's a real reason to take things without pedal. We can learn a lot from our playing if we listen without that in the right context. Dith, yes. Yes, and internet privacy, yes. I would always stress musicality over tempo. I think I would agree with that. I would always stress musicality over tempo. I bring up tempo because it's something we can all relate to, I think, and it's something you can't pull up a good recording of Chopin etudes that are significantly under the tempos that are marked on the page. So, yeah, Dith, tell us why. And then we're going to jump over to listen to Julio play. I feel like Dith is I'm gonna speak for you, Dith. So I think based on what we've talked about before, that you tend to practice faster than you probably should. And last time, Rozi, when we ended with talking about your scales, that was something we also brought up, was slowing down a ton. Yes, Bethany, losing the pedal just showed, some not great stuff in the fantasy impromptu. It is amazing. It's amazing. So, yeah. Okay, why don't we jump over and shift gears completely into a very lyrical piece. See, okay, Rhodesy, you said you struggle with slower, you can't even do the minute waltz slower than you used to because you mess up the count. Man, if you were my student, Rhodesy, we would take the entire hour to play slower, because the problem, and I see this all the time, if you can't slow the tempo down, the problem is that we didn't actually learn it. We breezed and kind of glossed over a lot of stuff. If we can't slow the tempo down, we don't actually know the notes and rhythms. We just know approximations of them. So, yeah, we should be able to slow the tempo down. I've told this story on live streams before, but it's probably been a year. There was I think it was a journalist that was going over to talk with Rachmaninoff at his house in Hollywood when it was a couple years before he passed away. And Rachmaninoff, the master, was playing the piano in the house. And so the reporter didn't ring the doorbell and didn't knock because he didn't want to interrupt the master. And he couldn't recognize what it was that Rachmaninoff was playing. And then after something like 30 minutes, he realized Rachmaninoff was practicing a Chopin etude. I think it was the etude in thirds. And he didn't even get through the entire piece once in 30 minutes because his tempo was so slow. Zero, welcome. We just finished up really talking about your stuff. I'm glad you made it, and I hope you find everything we talked about helpful. By the way, now that Zero's here, can we give him a little round of applause for his performance? I think that would be great. Zero, you did a lovely job. So I just picked at some stuff because that's my job as a teacher. Okay, there we go. Yes, internet privacy, it does have to do with growing brain synapses. We can speed the growth of synapses if we have those occasions of push. We can grow them far faster than if we always take the comfortable tempo. If we always take the comfortable tempo, it's going to take a much more extended time to get to the same place than taking 10 seconds here and there to push and make it happen faster. I've taught a handful of lessons in the past 2 weeks, private lessons, where students have actually experienced this with me. They've been struggling and struggling and struggling, and we increased the tempo so far beyond what they thought they were capable of, but in short enough bursts. And then it's like they look at me like this world unlocked for them because we go back to the tempo that they'd like to play, and they're like, holy cow, this is easy. And it wasn't easy even after months of slow practice, which is what we always talk about. It wasn't easy after months, but 5 minutes of well-directed, challenging practice, and bam, huge difference. Yes, I agree with that. And that happens all the time in practice streams, internet privacy, about playing fast and making the same mistakes over and over again. That is a bad use of playing faster and a bad use of your time. We always want to avoid that. That's why I said, like, if we take 2 bars of this and it's going horribly, or if you play 2 bars of anything and it's going horribly, stop, reset, and bump the tempo back down, because pushing when it's falling apart will not at all be helpful. Okay. Okay, Julio, are you still here? Yes, there is. I see Julio in the chat. Great. Okay, we're going to jump over and listen to Julio playing Chopin's Prelude, number 6 in B minor. All right, here we go. Nice work, Julio. I'm smiling because of the duet in the background. Let's give Julio a round of applause, shall we? Absolutely. Hello, Play the Mind. Welcome. I haven't seen you on a stream before. Oh, and FaZe. Hey, FaZe. Didn't get to say hi to you. Okay. Julio, very first thing. Welcome, Seth. Very first thing that I want to address is something that's going on in the right hand a lot that might be making your right hand actually more difficult to keep quiet. And that is every time your fifth finger is not being used, for example, on the first chord here. Now I'm wondering where this happened. Maybe it was here. I would see your fifth finger stick up and pull away from the keys as soon as you were using other fingers and you didn't want to use 5. Wherever those spots are, whether it's here and we're trying to avoid playing with 5, really try to get used to feeling that we can play with all of the other fingers, even including 4, and 5 does not have to lift to get out of the way of playing, especially in a piece that is as slow as this. And we don't want to be playing from a position of tension in part of the hand and then trying to be free in the other part of the hand, especially when this is so soft and has to be just so mellow. Bethany's the curse of the levitating pinky. Yes. Oh, yes. If we can especially keep it calm, the fifth finger, can we keep the fifth finger calm while things are slow? That's going to be great practice, and it's going to bleed over into other things that are faster and more complicated, more complex. Okay, that was the first thing. Second thing is also a technical thing, Julio. Looking at your pedal, I love that we could see it because I can tell you this. I can't show you with my foot, but I can show you with my hand. Your pedal was here, and the tip of your foot, the toes were here, and your heel was up in the air. I know you're playing a keyboard, right? And I know. But really good practice. We're going to have a lot more control over pedal if we get that heel on the ground, and then the pedal is being we pedal with the ball of the foot, not the toes, but with the ball of the foot, and we rotate. Let me do this more evenly. Here we go. So if the foot's on the ground and the heel's on the ground, we rotate like that to pedal. Don't have the habit of trying to lift with the heel up. Hello, Samed. Okay, so those are two really important things, Julio, if you can get in that habit. And I know, like, you're at home, you might not even realize that your foot was sticking up off the ground while you're pedaling because it's comfortable. But really make that a habit. Get the heel on the ground and pedal with the ball of the foot. Okay, let's get into the music. First thing. There's this marking right at the beginning. Sotto voce. Sotto voce. Can anyone tell me what sotto voce means? I, of course, know, but I'm looking. Let's make this interactive. Bonus points if Julio gets there first. Internet privacy, good guess. But no. If we know language, what does voce mean? Yes, Greg. Softly voiced. Under the voice, play the mind. Yes. Good. Julio says you know the tempo marking, but you ignored that one. Yes, sotto voce is more than just soft, but it's actually under the voice. And you could think about that as meaning like whispered. And I particularly think under your breath. Thank you, Antonio. That is, I think, an even better translation, under the breath. And I think it particularly applies to the right hand and not as much to the left hand. The left hand needs to be very expressive. Notice we don't even get a dynamic marking at the beginning of the piece. There is none. So, and I know these, just to point this out really quick, these are not accents. They are emphasis marks. Emphasis and accent are different in Chopin's music. And emphasis just means we are somehow differentiating this note from others around it. So, and Julio, you weren't doing this, but for example, it would be a misread to play. That is just simply an accent, and that's not what Chopin intends. There is a sense of pulse, but the emphasis mark is very soft, it's very subtle. Okay, let's move on from there. Okay, now that we know that, and we know that sotto voce will primarily apply to the right hand, the left hand, and this is going to be the first thing that we're going to practice together, Julio, the left hand needs to be beautifully phrased and sung. So you're doing a great job already of following these hairpins, which in this case, unlike what we just looked at, these hairpins are directions of rubato, even more so than directions of dynamic. They happen to follow the phrase marking as well. The phrase mark is really what's telling us that we increase dynamic to the top of the phrase. And then we round it off. But the hairpins are telling us also speed to the top of the phrase. And then taper, time with time. And then speed again. Now, you're already doing some of that, Julio. Are you saying you struggle with tension so much with your left? When you get to the thumb crossovers, your thumb collapses. Let's talk about that, Julio. I'm glad you brought that up because I couldn't really see your left hand in the video. So, do some practice. These are great. We have some nice arpeggios that move here, and then the next one, right? Let the hand, the wrist, and the arm follow the finger that's being used. So when the cross happens, notice how the fingers are just crawling up the keys to the crossover. I'm not sure if you're using, what fingers you're using here. I use a crossover to 2 instead of playing that all in one hand position, for example. Okay? But most importantly, soon as 5 plays, as soon as each finger plays, the arm is moving the hand like this, so that we're never getting stuck and we're never stretching like this. And then if you're using a different fingering like this, look at how stretched the 5th finger is here, and there's no need for it to be there. So let the hand come back. I call it relaxing when the hand returns to a more closed position. And then when we cross, first of all, when the thumb is playing here, we're not stretched. We have a lot more support, right? So the thumb can feel the same kind of support that we can give the rest of the fingers in the bridge. The thumb has a harder time with that because it's on the side. But it can feel some of that same support, and it feels it much more easily if we're not stretched. Rest, right? So let the hand come together. Feel if you can even play and wiggle your hand and your arm on the thumb here. We're maintaining support, but also freedom. The key is being held down, but wherever the rest of the mechanism is free. Wiggle, crossover. Julio, I hope that helps. When you say use thumb on beat, yeah, great. That's what I was just showing you. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to talking about the phrase. In internet privacy, you said each hand, very musical, yes. Practice hands separately, yes. And especially because the left hand is responsible for almost all of the melody here. We need to hear and understand exactly what the melody is on its own in order to let the right hand follow it. So If the melody pushes, for example, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and oops. Let me do that again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. I'm counting all of the subdivisions because they're very important for maintaining context for our rubato. So even on our holds, it's not just a hold, right? We know that obviously because the right hand is playing with it. But the tempo, the rhythm of the right hand should be dictated by the rhythm that you're feeling the left hand hold in. Does that make sense? So if we feel the melody flowing 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. That's different than saying the right hand is going to give the pulse and the left hand's going to follow. So if I add the right hand to that, okay? So the right hand is pulsing, yes, but it's pulsing according to the tempo and according to the rhythm and rubato that we're giving the left. Don't make the left follow the right. Yes, Bethany, I love that. It sounds like cellos. Internet said the piece is it's like an etude. Yeah, it's a bit like a lyrical etude for the left hand. Okay, so Julio, take time to maybe this will help. If you speed up through these arpeggios, speeding up might allow the hand to actually be more free. Plus, it'll actually be, I think, even more musical because we don't want to get stuck on all of the 16ths. The 16ths lead us and they help us to sing out the uppermost note, right? So, take some time and make sure that we feel the arm moving, yes. But also, can we increase the speed of the phrase, at least at the beginning, so that we hear that musical link from the bottom, the arpeggio is almost like an introduction to the note. It's almost like a singer scooping into their pitch. It's more musical than that. But the main note would be D. Right? Yes, play the mind. I talk about that all the time. Could help to literally sing the left hand melody without playing it. Yep. And only play the right hand. Absolutely. Absolutely. If we know it well enough to sing, can you just sing the left hand by itself? Do you know it well enough to sing it? Can you sing, then the harder thing is, can you sing the left hand while only the right hand plays? Can you sing the left hand while the left hand plays? So you feel that. Let's see, Julio says the tension gets worse around 16 and 17. Okay. Yes, I think I know the spot you're talking about. 12, 13, 14, 15, yep. Yeah. All of this. So Julio, the way to fix that is one note at a time. So this is the opposite approach of speeding up. But one note at a time, play, make sure everything here is supported but relaxed. The way I love testing that is that wiggle. Can everything continue to move here for every note? You can even try making a little just a little circle while the finger in use holds. Cross. So every time, we're just making sure that the rest of the mechanism is free. Maintaining support because we're holding down the key, but loosening everything else up. The other thing that you could try to do is, while you hold a single pitch, can you also wiggle the other fingers? I don't know if you can see that from this view. But can you kind of wiggle the other fingers? Yes? Okay, yeah, try those things out, Julio. Yeah, play the mind. Going back to that idea about singing. So important, and especially in this piece, really. Let's start again from the beginning. As soon as you, Seth, let me answer that question because it pertains. Does the circle direction depend on the direction you're going? I tend to... No, it doesn't. Not for the sake of this. If we were playing a line and shaping it with the wrist, yes, it would. The circle would go down as we descend with the left and up as we ascend. But for individual pitches, it does not matter. Any direction you want to. Okay, going back to the idea of singing. Let's do a little experiment together. If we sing this melody line and we really be free with it, vocally, from inside of us, listen to what happens. The high note of D is a little high for me, but it'll make my point even more. So, the higher in register, right, the more we stretch vocally. The more we stretch vocally, the more time we want to spend on that pitch and milk it, right, and really make it beautiful. And you could also then notice there were some pitches that on the piano, once we play, the sound is lost, right? But for example, the B that was in the second measure here, has a shape to it, right? We can't show that shape exactly with how we play a single note. We can maybe show a little bit of it with the right hand, maybe. But most importantly, if we feel that shape in here, it's going to affect how we physically play every other note in the phrase. Absolutely. So even though we can't show a crescendo on one pitch on the piano, feeling it happen is going to change how we articulate the next note in the phrase. And when it's done really well, we're actually going to give an illusion that the shape exists, even though it technically, physically, acoustically doesn't. Something that's so great about singing. The more extended the lines get, the bigger that shape becomes. So every one of these two-bar phrases now we reach further. Now we reach the furthest. Oops. Sorry about those notes. Okay. Singing that, makes such a difference if we feel that. So I know sometimes a 2-octave span, that can be really difficult to actually sing physically. But you'll hear a lot of pianists, great pianists do this. Can you hum through it at least? Can we go... You'll hear pianists in backgrounds of recordings humming stuff like that because they are physically connecting themselves to the line. That's one of the most difficult things we have to do as pianists is connect ourselves to the line, the melodic line, because we're so detached from the instrument. We have a key to press, and there are hundreds of moving parts inside the piano, and then the hammer hits the string. Wow, right? A singer, the breath is connected to the chords. The breath passes the chords, right? A string player, I love the idea of cello playing this also, because if you also imagine a string player, the bow is connected, and the bow has to stay connected to the string to maintain sound and to create phrase. I think it's easier for us, if we're not string players, to feel it sung, because we all can make sound. Well, many of us can make sound with our voice, right? Not all of us have had access to a string player, to a string instrument to play ourselves or to experience ourselves. So if you have had access to that, you also know that what a bow feels like, and you know what that connection feels like in a different way. Anyway, going too far here. I think we all get the point. Dith, you say that's been one of the nice things about being a singer first prior to learning the piano. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. One of the first videos, one of the first shorts I put out on this channel talked about this exact thing, because it's so important and it's so influenced all of my playing and my writing, is when I was 14, my teacher at the time told me I had to learn how to sing. Before that, I was a button pusher, right? The piano was 88 buttons, and they went up and down, and I played, and I followed the notes on the page. And so I joined choir in high school, and I sang in choir, and I played for choir, which is a whole other story we won't get into today. But the combination of those two things it did tremendous things for my musicality. And I owe it all to my teacher telling me to learn how to sing. And thankfully, it was with a group of people where it wasn't awkward or something like that. I didn't feel singled out. But we don't have to feel singled out if we do this at home. We can all experience the same thing, right? Okay, let's jump back into this. One thing that I forgot to mention right at the beginning. There we go. Julio, I have this note circled here at the end of this bar, circled in blue. I believe you played an A natural, so just double check that note in the middle is still A sharp. Okay. Before we got too far, I wanted to point that out. Okay. Next thing, I shouldn't have flipped away from the sheet music. Here we go. We've talked a lot about left hand now and about singing the left hand. When we get into measure 6, there's a second phrase that starts here, and it's in the right hand. So, right now the left hand, or the cello, the lower voice, is singing out. And then we are going to duet, and the upper voice is going to join in. So now we have two voices. I went slowly so you could really try to listen back and forth to what each voice is doing. They're both extending, stretching, and resolving in different ways. Julio, I'll check that out in a second. Yeah. All right. So, yes, pay attention. A lot of pianists will take the opportunity that's presented in measure 6 to really bring out the right hand part. So if I put that in context, a lot of what you'll hear is the left hand begin the phrase in 5, and then the right hand kind of take over, if you will. So something like this. And that can be very successful, and it provides a nice juxtaposition. Yes, but I think there's another opportunity here if we can really listen to both lines. Because they're beautiful. They are so gorgeous. That's such wonderful writing. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's jump over, Julio, to your question about measure 23. You said you have a habit of stretching this. Yes. Since we're on this bar, let's point out a couple things. You'll notice in my edition, this is again the Polish National Edition. The tie that's down here is in parentheses, and it has an asterisk. And I have translated the Polish because I cannot read Polish, or I think that's French. I cannot read either of those. So this B in the original score, in the original publication, was tied and not restruck in the second bar. Okay, that's interesting to know. But there is another copy, a student's copy of Chopin's, where he has told the student to play the B again. I would experiment with both ways, Julio, and see what you like. If there's one that helps you to keep the phrase moving in 23, go with that one for sure, since both are allowed. If I were to pick one that I prefer, I really like extending the tie from the previous bar. Here is that resolution. And then I really like extending that tie and not restriking the low B flat. We still have to keep 5 on it, so let me show you that a little bit bigger. We still have to finger sustain the low note because the pedal is going to need to probably lift for that, and then again for the downbeat of 23. So it's not going to help us leave and continue up the arpeggiation, right? But I think it's a great musical choice. Hello. We have a newcomer. Oh, beautiful. So, Julio, I don't know if that answers your question about stretching that or not, but I hope that gives you something to think about. Let's go back and talk one more time quickly about each of these phrases, just to remind us. Sing through them. Take rubato. Rubato doesn't mean taking time. It also means giving time, right? So all kinds of these phrases. Push forward more. Now we have forte, and then piano. Yeah. Explore those dynamics also. I don't know if this is written in your score, Julio, but really go to forte and come back to piano. There's another asterisk here, which is saying that in another of the copies, this is actually marked pianissimo. So don't be afraid of those two dynamics, right? This, once again, the hairpin, is a push forward in time, but it's not two consecutive pushes forward, yeah, you know what I mean. We're not pushing and then going from where we left and pushing again. We come back first. We push, and then it's like a subito, both dynamic and tempo. So we can still take that liberty both times. Okay, the last thing I think I wanted to mention. Yeah. Julio, we talked about the physical part of pedaling. Well, welcome from Russia. I'm glad that you're here. Julio, I'll come back to measure 23. Let me say one more thing here. And that is, we talked about your physical pedaling and keeping the heel on the ground, but also really listen to what you are connecting with the pedal, maybe accidentally. For example, that's a lot of pedal, and we don't clearly, it doesn't allow us to clearly hear where the melody is going, right? But instead, so when we have, let's say, a lower pitch and it's ringing, we have to be really careful about how we can extend that resonance into things that are subsequent. Chopin knew enough that if he wanted, let's go back here, if he wanted the low left hand to continually ring and all of that, right? If he wanted that to happen, he would have either written like a tie to nothing, or he would have written this as a second voice with another half note, for example, over here. And it would have been tied. Even though it's physically impossible to do that, it would show us the continuation of resonance. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't show that to us. Instead, we get these single arpeggios, and we have notes in the middle of the melody that the strength of them, the emotional strength of them, comes from being really clearly articulated. In measure 9, the C sharp. We don't want that C sharp to be muddied by the rest of that. It's interesting alone, but that doesn't sound like Chopin. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Bethany. Oh, Antonio, I see your comment now. Okay, Julio, before we wrap up, let me go back over to measure 23 and look at what you said. You said you're talking about the stretch in your thumb. It tends to stretch when you try to go up. So I think you're talking physical stretch. I think the way to address this, regardless of the fingering choice that you have in this bar, whether we go from 5 to 1, like that, or 5 to 5, I think the key is going to be to do what we already talked about, where we go one note at a time, play the next pitch, let the hand come back and relax. So, for example, if we are stretching this octave and you're playing to 1, after we play with the thumb, let the hand, we do stretch to make a connection, and let the hand relax. And do that and get used to that motion before we try to cross and play everything else. So stretch to the octave, relax. Then if we need to finger substitute or whatever we do, or if it's here, if you take that fingering, that would be the same as the, actually pretty much the same as the opening. So let's take a look at that. If you, Julio, if you, instead of playing 1 on the beginning of the octave, this suggestion is to take 1, finger substitute 5, and then that is a lot of finger substitution. And if we want to move the line forward, it's actually very hard to do that. So I would gravitate toward taking the bottom choice, which is 5. We've connected it with the pedal. 5 leaves, and we just replace 5 up the octave on B flat. And now we have an arpeggiation that matches If we go back to the previous page, there we go. We have an arpeggiation that much more closely matches the very first bar. Okay, you said one last question. You're not sure if you should adjust your seat to fix your pedal technique. You should only adjust your seat to fix how our arms and hands are working at the keyboard. And what I noticed, I'll take a quick look. You know, and I'll even throw it up on the screen so we can all talk about it. So here's an example, Julio, of where your position is. Your torso, even though we can't see it, your torso is probably a little bit low, but we shouldn't fix that by sitting higher. We should try to fix that by lowering the keyboard if we can, because it already looks like you're sitting quite high. But we actually want to be in a higher orientation to the keys than where you currently are. There's a tiny bit of, if I slouch, there's a tiny bit of this shape, kind of a hump up, and then that drops back down. And we want that to be at least parallel. At least parallel is healthier, okay? The only way we can do that is either increase your seating position or lower the keyboard. If you can find this, I don't have a tape measure with me, but Julio, all keyboards on acoustic pianos, they are all built to be the exact same height off the ground. That's actually a really important measurement. So uprights or grands, any make and model, they are all exactly the same height off the ground. If you can find out what that measurement is, I can also get a tape measure out after the stream and send you an email. But if you can get your keyboard to be in that position, then we can adjust everything else to be much more natural and much more aligned with how the acoustic piano is built. So if we pop back here really quick, it looks like the keyboard is up too high, which is causing you to have to sit higher than you should for your feet, but it's still not high enough for your hands, if that all makes sense. Thanks for the comment. I wish the person that's here that's Russian, I cannot read your name. I wish I could. Is there any way you could type it in Western characters for us? That would be, I'd love to say hello. Julio, I think that wraps everything up, yes? Let's give Julio another round of applause. Nice work, Julio. Keep going. I would love to hear you play this again when you've worked on a little bit of that release, and we can push through some of the phrases. Yeah. Okay, I'll call you Fluffy. Wonderful. Hello, Fluffy. I appreciate your comments. Let's see. Play the mind. So you said you read that the resonance of pianos in Chopin's time was lower than in modern pianos. That is correct. In that sense, the long pedal markings by Chopin sometimes might need to be cut up. When we are given pedal markings from Chopin himself, a lot of times they no longer work on the modern instrument. So if we understand that he wanted the pedal down to increase resonance, right, to a certain degree that wasn't otherwise possible, we can take that and learn from that, but also know that it's the same thing as, I'm going to quote a little bit of Schiff talking about Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. There's a masterclass online where he talks about that Beethoven intends the pedal to be down for the entire first movement and never changed, never lifted. That is, I think, another example of possibly Beethoven really did want that, and possibly Beethoven played it that way. But his instrument wouldn't have, for example, sustained that second bar. It wouldn't keep going. It wouldn't keep sustaining. It would die away much more quickly. So, in a sense, sure, on Beethoven's piano, he could have put the pedal down, one pedal for the entire piece, we would have a very specific sonic product that we get from that we simply do not get on the modern piano. And I think it's a little silly to think that we can stick the pedal down on an instrument that Beethoven didn't have and didn't listen to, never heard before, really. Our modern piano is like a distant cousin of the pianoforte. And think that the notation and the marking works the same. I think we need to make adjustments to really fulfill the composer's intention. Oh, beautiful. Julio, don't apologize. Absolutely don't apologize. It was wonderful to hear you play. And we're all here to learn and get better. So absolutely, yeah. And Bedlington Groomer, I 100% agree. Yes. Okay. All right. We have one more thing. It's not a video, but let's see. Antonio had sent me in a little screenshot and asked for some help with some larger rolled chords. Okay, I have found that. So we're going to address this for Antonio really quickly. And then I think we'll have some time to open it up for any questions. Okay, here we go, Antonio. So this is what you sent me. So your question is really about starting in this second bar, right? There, and playing all of these rolled chords. So what have we got? Nice. What song is this, Antonio? I don't recognize the melody off the top of my head. Getting into these rolled chords. This orientation for the hand of having the third on the top is probably one of the more difficult ones to roll well. So what we have are, let's switch here. So we have kind of a, we'll just call it a shape because the inversions are changing. This chord shape where we have 5 and 4 probably playing the top note. So first of all, Antonio, if you're not using 5 and 4, that is likely going to be the most secure way of playing these. Although playing 4 and 5 separately is difficult, right? So you might be tempted to use 3 and 5. And that is okay. It pulls us a little bit out of the most ideal position. But if you find that that's easier, especially right now, go with that, Antonio. So 5, 4, or 1, 4, 5 for each of these if you can. And if that is just far too awkward, use 3. Okay. Next, notice how every time I'm playing these, there is a shift in wrist. So even though my hand is stretched out, I'm going to use 1, 3, 5. Sorry, Antonio. Even though my hand is stretched, I'm aligning somewhat behind the thumb, and then as the roll happens, the alignment shifts. So it's a very quick. If I slow it down, and just like we actually talked about for Julio, notice how the thumb, as soon as the thumb plays, it's relaxed under the hand. Same, next chord, same thing. And if I show you a little bit of what that looks like from the side, you can see there's also a little bit of vertical motion. As we approach the 5th finger, the wrist comes up just a little bit. And then, okay, great, you use 4 and 5. I just saw that. I'll continue to use 4 and 5 now. The rest of the inner workings of this are the same. Okay, so there's a little bit of wrist elevation as we approach 4 and 5. What would be even better, using pedal, can you release completely? And then play the next one. Release up and completely off the keys. So there's 3 components here now. Yeah, Antonio, 3 and 5. Okay. Yeah, pick and choose. Either of those is fine. So 3 components to the motion. There is the lateral component, using 3 and 5 now. Right? So even if I go faster, you can see that the motion is not quite as large, but it's still there. There's still this lateral wiggle happening. Right? Okay, that's one component. The other component is, as we approach 5, there's a little bit of vertical introduced. So if you were to be able to really see this in 3 dimensions, it would be a wrist circle, where we would start here, the wrist drops and then releases up. Drops and releases up. That's really what it feels like as I show the camera. So, third component to really emphasize the naturalness of the release is to literally leave the key and take your time and feel how the fingers and the hand can relax. Can you do that slowly? And can you also do it more quickly? So this turns into one motion. It's 3 components, but it turns into one motion that we execute when we play. And that will prevent us from being too stiff and trying to clamp down. And the more stiff we are, if we're trying to reach the octave and we're worried about playing it, actually the less easy it is to roll it in the first place. The roll has to be relaxed and smooth. Fluid is a better word than just relaxed. Fluid. Cool. Antonio, I hope that helps. Those are my top tips for you to address those rolled chords. All right? Cool. Bedlington Groomer, I have not made a video about that. No, I have not. Sounds like that would be a great video. Okay. No, I haven't made a short about it either, I don't think. I have talked before about alignment. I talk a lot about alignment. I feel like it's all the time. But probably not exactly in that context. Great. So we have a little bit of time. Do we have any questions? Either follow-ups from Antonio or Julio or Zero, if Zero's still here. Do we have any follow-ups about anything or anything else that people would like to chat about? Antonio, the others with 4 notes, guess what? They're going to work exactly the same way. I'll show you real quick. Here's our, it says D minor 7, but it's really an add 9. So, same way. The fluidity of the wrist doesn't need to be quite as big because it's not an octave. And we also aren't using, for example, 4, where we need to navigate from 1 to 4 to 5. We're playing 1, 2, 3, 5 here. But you see, same component. If I go more slowly, same thing. And from this side, same thing. Okay. Let's see, you're saying the D to D one. Oh, Antonio, it would still be the same thing. That's in the next bar. This one. That one's not marked as a roll. But if you're just playing it, I know you've got big enough hands to stretch an octave. So if you're just playing it, the melody continues on the top note. So we can, once again, let the hand relax toward the melody. Like that, right? If we are rolling it instead, the mechanism of the roll works exactly the same way. Good, good, good. Before I get into the couple questions that popped in, let me just make sure that Antonio is feeling good about this. Hopefully, yes. I'm going to answer Julio's question really quickly because it's a real simple answer. Julio, the pedal technique, your heel shouldn't just be closer to the ground, it should be on the ground. For example, if the top of the fallboard here is the ground and the palm of my hand, the bottom of the palm is your heel, it's literally on the ground, and then it pivots like this. Okay? Great, Antonio. Okay. Always reach out if you need more help. Always reach out. Okay, jumping back to Bethany. Bethany's question. She says, do you have any tips for practicing ragtime, like leaps in the left hand? If you're not already doing this, Bethany, aim for one thing instead of a whole bunch of stuff. So, for example, if we're playing, we'll stick in D. So here I have a leap of an octave and some back and forth. There's some more chords. Okay. So as I'm doing this leap, and to be consistent, I'm aiming for one thing. The bottom note is easy. I just have to aim fifth finger for the particular note, if it's one note. One note, the top, is more interesting. You need to choose, do you aim for the thumb, basically, or whatever finger you're using to play on the lower note? One of the outer notes. One of those is going to be easier for you, the thumb or the lower pitch. So choose one to aim for, and don't try to play a single note followed by a 3-note chord where we think about all 3 pitches. We're not trying to land on all 3. We're trying to land on the landmark note, the one note that we structure the rest of our hand shape around. So for me, it would be the thumb. But I have experience with different people feel differently about that. So try out both and see if one works better than another. If we have things like octaves to this, that's even more challenging. Once again, now we have 2 places we want to pick a single pitch. Do we pick to focus on the 5th finger, the bottom of the octave, and then another note in the right hand, or do we focus on the thumb of the octave in the bottom and something in the top? For me, that changes depending on exactly what's happening in the piece and how complicated it is and how far away it is from everything. And sometimes it depends on, do I have time to let my eyes look down? If I have time, I'm more likely to choose to focus on landing 5. If I don't have time, or I don't have time to look as far, or I have to be focused on what the right hand is doing, and I just get maybe a quick glance or no glance, I'm usually focused on the thumb in an octave. A thumb has the benefit of it's not as far down the keyboard, so if my eyes don't have time to travel as far, I don't have to force them to go further, right? Yes, landmark notes. Yeah, that's right, Bedlington Groomer. Greg, yes, I did. I did answer that one for Julio, but thanks. Sometimes I miss things, and I always appreciate it. Okay. Dith, you asked for tips for sight reading practice. How many times can you use the same piece before you're not sight reading anymore and just practicing? One. One, depending on how much you've looked at it. To test yourself, if you can look at the sheet music and you can remember what it sounds like, It's definitely not sight reading anymore. So depending on your ability to retain that and how quickly you can retain that, you might find that you can maybe get away with using something twice a week for a couple weeks before it's going to be too familiar. And if you're really quick, then you're only going to get away with once, maybe twice a month using a single piece to sight read. Tips for more sight reading practice. So let's go back to this is great. I'm going to use Antonio's example that he sent, and we're going to talk about it from a perspective of sight reading. So, okay, we're jumping in on measure 24 at the top of the page. This is a great example because the chord changes that are written here, right in the middle of the measures, here, that actually is a great summary of what we should be trying to do when we read notation. So, for example, when I read these three pitches, the first pitches in the left hand of the measure, I instinctively, I basically read the bottom note, and then I read the shape that is made by the hand. So, for example, how quickly can you identify that this is the same shape? It starts on a different pitch, but the layout is exactly the same. The notes just happen to be spread out instead of stacked. How quickly can you identify that actually all of the left-hand chords that we can currently see are the same shape? This one, same shape, same shape. By shape, I mean these are all spans of a seventh, but I'm not thinking that way. I'm not thinking about the interval, and I'm not identifying the interval. I'm not identifying all of the letters of the notes in the chord. I'm thinking about one. This is similar to what we talked about with Bethany. One landmark. Where is that landmark? Most of the time for me, it's on the bottom. So landmark note, and what the hand shape is to play all the rest of the pitches that are related in the chord or throughout the bar. Okay, so that is a huge thing to look for when you're practicing sight reading. Before, you're very advanced if you can see all of that in real time. Okay, so start with identify, as you know, every time we do sight reading, look through the piece ahead of time, and we want to look for familiar things. So what can we see that's familiar? As soon as we can understand that first shape, I would even suggest, take a highlighter. Thank you so much, Jan. I would take a highlighter and highlight in one color everything that feels similar. So if we do that here, if I put things in red, let's say, I would go through and I'd say that's one shape. And then all of this would get highlighted as being the same thing. So now my goal is, instead of reading all the notes, I know every time my hand moves, I am trying to find only the lowest note and the rest of the shape, not all of the pitches. And I'm going to highlight all that stuff ahead of time before I sit and try to sight read it the first time. Okay, something else here, I'll put these in green. We have similar pitches. That's easy to see when they're all the same pitch. Here, this is a scale. It's just a linear scale, stepwise. These are all of the same chord structures, also in linear motion, in stepwise motion. So I'm explaining all this stuff in words, but when we look, we can start by writing all of it down, right? We can start by telling ourselves all of that. And the end goal is that we see the pattern on the page. We see a pattern that we recognize, that we've played a lot. We see, well, repeated note, right? That's an easy one to see. We see a chord shape that moves around, right? We see a scalar pattern. And now all of a sudden, once again, if we go back, instead of reading a ton of notes on these two lines that I've marked up a little bit, instead of reading all of that, I am reading, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm reading 4 things. Maybe call it maybe 4.5 and 5 because of the low notes there. But I'm reading 5 shapes instead of, I don't know how many pitches that all is. It's in the 30s or 40s probably, something like that. So when we can minimize that information, same information, but condense it into a format that we can identify quickly and means something. Like, interval reading is only meaningful to us if we know what the interval feels like. If we can identify something's a major seventh, that's great. Wonderful on paper. Important in a lot of ways. But for playing, what's most important is, do you know what a major 7 feels like? Do you know what it feels like in C? Do you know what it feels like in D, which is different? It's remarkably different. Do you know what it feels like in D flat, which is also remarkably different from the other two? So the more keys we explore, the more we can feel all of those things, right? When you practice, for example, yeah, Dith, this was your question. I know, Dith, you're working on stuff for exams. So that means you're practicing cadence patterns, right? Something like this. Instead of only going through the motions of practicing and saying, okay, I got it right, I'm using the right fingers, take a look at the chord shapes you're playing. Root position, second inversion. Root position, first inversion of the 7. Right? I can do all of that like I just did. I didn't look at my hands at all because I know exactly what it feels like because I've done it just so much. We can start building those tiers and building that information to draw on just by paying more attention to, instead of just playing the chords, let's identify it. Root position. First inversion means something. When you get another first inversion chord, let's do this one. Sorry, second inversion. When you get another second inversion chord, or here, they all feel the same way. Dith said, no wonder they still have me practicing Mary Had a Little Lamb type things. You mean for sight reading? Yes. So sight reading gets better and better and better the more we learn to see all these shapes and patterns that you're already experiencing. That's why we say when you sight read stuff, you always take stuff that's significantly easier than the rep that's challenging for you currently. So always 3 or 4 levels, at least, lower than your current level. Take that stuff and sight read it. Because by the time, Dith, you're on like level 5, let's see, for this grade, you're on like level 5 or 6, right, Dith? So by the time you've played rep in those levels, you have seen everything already. You've seen many times everything that's used to write music for level 1, for example. What makes level 5 still difficult to play is that there's a lot of stuff in there that you probably still haven't experienced yet, right? But as you continue to grow and you continue to practice, when you get to level 6, level 7, level 8, then you're going to go back in level 4 and 5. You're going to say, oh, I recognize this. This is this scale, or it's this pattern, and you execute it immediately, right? Okay, that was a fun primer on sight reading. It was more than a primer. That's some more advanced stuff about sight reading. Let's go back. Let's see, Seth, you said, I'm trying to pedal like you suggest in your video, but I'm finding the pedal ends up blurring. Do you have any additional advice for making sure you release fully and at the right time? I think, Seth, you're probably talking about the video where I talk in particular about the release point of the pedal. So anytime we're releasing the pedal, it takes time I now wish I had a camera available to show my feet today, but it takes time for the pedal to do its job when we release. And we also have to be aware of where the pedal is actually doing its job. And on every keyboard, it's going to be different. On every acoustic piano, it's going to be different. So I'm stuck in D minor 7 because we were using it. So if we have this and we want to change to a G7, how do we make sure that it doesn't blur like this? That wasn't blurry enough. There's a little hangover there. How do we make sure of that? First thing, when the pedal lifts, my hands, so right now my pedal is off, hands are still engaged, fingers are still engaged. We have to coordinate the time that we remain in the key. Pedal off, now pedal on, hands can come off. We have to coordinate that time first. So the hands have to know we can't just play and release and expect the pedal to catch everything. So keep the fingers engaged. That's number one. Number two, when the fingers stay engaged, we realize that we can actually leave the pedal released for a pretty considerable amount of time. So if I show you, let's say with my right hand, still playing, so pedal down. Now I'm going to try to show you with my hand what my pedal is doing. Pedal is still down. Here's the release and back down. Do you see how long it was? Released, back down. Release, back down. It's quite a long time. It's not release and down. Because as soon as we make that quick pedal change, we can sometimes use that to our advantage in more advanced music because we recapture what the piano is doing. When we're doing that, we're recapturing on purpose. When it's an accident, we have not let the pedal completely, we have not let the dampers do their job. Things are still ringing. So if we change to something drastically different, so you can really hear the blur, and I pedal very fast, right? There was an example of hand letting go too soon. So when the pedal is too quick, it recaptures what's already ringing. So in order for that complete change to happen, pedal up. It's that time that it stays disengaged. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so to sum that up, two things. Let the fingers stay engaged so the foot has more time to begin with. And then number two, let the foot take more time releasing before it comes back down. The reason it stays connected is because of the release point, and that's what that video is about. The release point is right where we play again. That's how it stays perfectly connected. Okay? Great. Seth, I hope that helps. I'm just looking at your question again. Fingers crossed. Oh, I see you have a follow-up. How do you know how long to wait? You listen. It's the only thing that can help you. And it's the only thing that can help all of us. We have to grow accustomed to listening to what the pedal's doing. Even for me, for example, okay, my piano releases in a particular way. It does it. I know it very well because it's the instrument I play all the time. If I go and play a concert on another instrument, the pedal is invariably going to be different. The way it works is going to feel different. The point at which the dampers connect is going to be different. The amount of time it takes the dampers to do their job is different. It's all different. It's all the time. And the bigger the piano you get, when you get down to the bottom couple octaves, the longer it takes. Even beautiful concert grands take a long time to dampen the lowest couple octaves because there's just a lot more energy in the string. So our pedaling always has to adjust to that, no matter what. So we start that process by first, on the instrument we play all the time, learn to listen to what it's giving you and learn to react to that. So I can't actually tell you how long, because my answer on this piano, first, I don't even think about an amount of time. I think about what it sounds like, and I have enough experience to know it's going to be this motion in the foot. And as soon as I transition to play another instrument, I always, within the first 8 measures of playing something, I'm figuring out what the pedal is doing. So hopefully I, get a dress rehearsal or something. And that is one of the big things to figure out when you play a new instrument. How is the pedal working? How fast is it? How long is it taking? Where is the contact point? I want to try to get that in my mind as fast as possible so that I can once again react in a more natural way. Yes. So, okay, Seth, you say playing a recital Sunday. Try if you can. Can you get 30 seconds on the piano that you're going to play up there? That's the best thing. That's the best thing to do. And if you can't, we just try to pay attention the best we can in the first few measures that we get to play. And we do the best we can. We try to learn from those measures, react to them, and adjust our playing. That's a really hard thing to do. And I think everybody understands that it takes practice, just like everything else we talk about. It takes practice to get used to playing on various instruments and reacting more quickly. So I wouldn't stress yourself out too much about it for this coming weekend. And if you have time to work on a little bit of the release for what you're playing this weekend, great. If you have time to elongate the release of the foot. But I honestly, if you were my student, I would just tell you, don't start working on this until after Sunday. Start working on it with the next thing. Don't introduce a new piece that is going to add complexity to what's already going to be a stressful situation. So just play, enjoy playing, do the best you can, and the next time we'll just take another step and make it a little bit better. Okay. Okay, going back. See, Fluffy had said how to position your hands correctly so your paws don't get tired. Here, I'll give you a quick thing to do, Fluffy. And this is also on the channel to take a look at in my set of posture videos. If you can stand up, even better, but sit at the piano, let your arms dangle, shake your hands out, let them be completely relaxed. Now, we're going to bend at the elbow. If we're truly relaxed here, actually, the wrist will also flop. So we're going to add support at the wrist. So wrist is supported, bend at the elbow, bring the hand up, and let it rest on the keys. That is the position we should always try to return to as we play. We play from this position, we leave it and stretch. We might do some other things with the fingers and crosses, but then every possible time we try to return to that. The way we find it in practice, let the arm relax, shake the hand out, pivot at the elbow, place the hand. The more we leave that position, this position of neutrality and naturalness, the more we leave that position, the more tired we're going to get. The more we hold our hand in some other position, the more tired we're going to get. So always making sure that we have time in our playing, mid-phrase, mid-piece, every moment possible to return. That really helps from getting tired, overtired. And just that alone can take you from only being able to play 10 or 15 minutes at a time to hours at a time. Let's say at least 1 hour. Beyond that, we might need to build some more endurance in some other ways. But it's not... I'm always hesitant to use words that are related to strength, and because of how we react to those words. So yes, sitting on the bench and playing in a healthy position takes endurance, but it's usually in the back and in the upper arms more so than in the hands. If the hands are doing their job correctly, where they relax a lot, we can sit here and play almost endlessly. Let's see. Play the Mind had a question. Technical question. Any suggestion on how to make 4/5 trills sound better, especially when 2 or 3 are on notes and being held down? Seth's, sorry. Play the Mind. Still use rotation if you can. You're probably doing something like playing Mozart. I have not played a 4/5 trill with 2 down in years, probably. Okay, so with 2 as our anchor, we're still going to rotate between 4 and 5. So you can see from this angle, there's still a rotational component. And if I just hold 2, 2 can still move around, right? If I show you from the top, 2 can move around. There's 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. So still using rotation, just like if we were to play like, I think the easiest trill fingering is between 1 and 3. That is all just a really fast shake. It's all rotation. And we can add in a little bit of finger articulation to make it nice and crisp, but that's easy, right? And the rotation can be fairly large because of the fingers. I think that's even easier than using 2 and 3. But 4 and 5, so practice alone, 4, 5 together, rotate between the 2, then add in holding down, 2, rotate between the 2. Okay. I think that would be my biggest suggestion. Stay away from anything where 2 is pressing and then we are lifting 4 and 5. That's going to slow us down, and it's not going to help us play more articulately. Okay. Oh yeah, Fluffy. Thanks, Bennington Groomer. Yes, I do. Yes, Fluffy. I do live streams on the 2nd Wednesday and the 4th Wednesday of the month. So, yes, we'll have another one of these in 2 weeks. Let's go back. Okay. Moving forward. Let's see, Julio, this was a follow-up on the pedaling thing we talked about. You said you think the solution is to fix the posture of your foot, is to lower your keyboard and seat by a little bit. The problem is the keyboard stand is at its lowest setting. Oh, yeah. If it's really all the way down, then the next best thing is, oh man. Can you find another thing in the house to put your keyboard on that is lower? Because it's still too high. That would be something I'd check out. And if you can't do that, since your pedal is detachable, do you have something firm enough, heavy enough, like a box filled with something, or some books that you can prop against the wall, or something like that, that you can stick the pedal on top of, so that you can your bench can be raised up to the correct height for the keyboard, and the pedals can also be raised up off the floor. They make these kinds of things for like grand pianos for little kids that take lessons on grand pianos, that the pedal, their feet don't touch the floor. So we need to get the position of the bench correct, so they're sitting way up high, and then they're 4 years old or something, and their feet just dangle off the side of the bench. And instead of having that happen, what we need is for the feet to have a platform to be on, and then the pedals are shifted. They're in a new place. So they're called pedal extenders. That won't work for your case because you're playing a digital, but you can do the same thing if you have a build or find a wide enough platform that you can have your feet flat, both feet, left and right, flat, easily flat. We can get that right heel on this platform, on this flat surface, and have the pedal on there to do this. So that probably is, you probably need to raise that, I'd guess 3 or 4 inches, maybe 5, based on remembering what the video looks like. Okay, Alexis. Hello, I'm sorry I didn't get to say hello, Alexis, before. Hello. So you said an opinion on Bartók's Mikrokosmos as a part of a learning path. Absolutely. I always try to stick with music that's by the great composers. And there's a lot of stuff that we can learn. So Mikrokosmos, I think, is a wonderful resource. And there are plenty of others. I believe like Tchaikovsky wrote an album for the young. That's another great place to look for repertoire. Schumann did. There are probably some others that I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head. But yes, Bartók's Mikrokosmos is great. So absolutely, I think it's a wonderful set of pieces. And if you're looking for something that's different, that I also think are great, especially for working on rhythm and more complex rhythm at near the same level as Mikrokosmos. Christopher Norton is a composer, living composer. He writes a lot of stuff that are a lot of pieces meant for learning. And he has a background that's more, I'd say, more based in some jazz playing or some various styles. And if you look at some Christopher Norton, you'll find he'll introduce syncopation and dotted rhythms and other things, other more complex rhythmic stuff far earlier than you'll see in the typical classical repertoire. So the notes themselves won't be that much more difficult to play. Kabalevsky. Yes, Alexis, that is also a great one. Yes, Norton, Christopher Norton. He has a series of levels of books. They're all modern stuff. If you are strictly into classical music, you might not like it. But if you're willing to explore some things that are a little bit more jazz influenced, his stuff is really, it's well written, and it's more difficult actually than it looks. Diff, yes, I love that comment. Easy songs for babies, but in German, and then they're full of songs that are difficult. It's like Mozart's Sonata Facile. The what is it? No, it's not that one. Oh, I'm confusing all of my C major sonatas and sonatinas. Oh. Yeah, that's Mozart's Easy Sonata. I think it's Seth. And it's level 8 RCM. Yeah, so it's like 10 years typically. For kids, it's 10 years into the learning process. Some adults get there much faster. But I think it's hilarious that it's called the Easy Sonata. Okay. Z-Spark, if you're still here, hello. Hot cross buns. Thanks, Dith. Okay, let's see. Bedlington Groomer, I think, has the next question. Let's see. I think we're getting close to the end of questions. So we'll do a couple more. Bedlington Groomer, what about when you have to hit the note fast in a leap? How to get the timing right when it's that fast? First, go more slowly to understand what the rhythm is supposed to be. So the first thing is we have to give our ears a chance to hear what it is that we're supposed to be replicating in the correct proportions, right? So if we have, let's say, I'll just stick with chords, an F and a C, but they're spaced. And we want to make that leap. And we need to make it quickly for some reason. Maybe it needs to be this fast. And this is our performance tempo. Could be in the middle of a bar, anything. We can structure it however you'd like. So we have a leap where fifth finger comes up by a ninth, and the thumb leaps by a seventh. And I'll show you here so you can also see that. There's our first chord, second chord. First chord, second chord. Right. So first, if these are, let's say, 2 quarter notes, if we know that this is our click, our metronome, let's make sure we feel it as 2 beats. If we need to go slower than that, that is fine also. 1 and 2 and. While we're going slowly, can you feel this motion as one shape? So instead of a play, shift, find it, and then play again, that's actually 1, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we execute everything that we truly need to do, the preparation to play, the playing, a shift, a preparation, and a play, that's 5 components just to play a leap. But if we minimize that and we have 1 preparation, we play. As we play, we leave, and in 1 movement, the release of the bottom is also the preparation to play the notes on the top. Now we have 1, 2, 3 movements instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we want to try to feel that as 1 at our slow tempo, and then use that tempo ladder like we've talked about earlier today, and slowly increase that until we're able to make the leap in time. But start as slow as it takes to get those notes correct and to get that feeling correct. But really important, when it's slow, don't utilize the extended time to be less precise than you can be, right? So that's why instead of just playing and playing again, we're focusing on 1 movement to connect both sets of chords. 1 movement. When we can do that, then as we speed up, it's going to get easier and easier. Oh, Bedlington Grimmer, you said how? He said, sorry, how to do the leap and get the pedaling right with that first fast note. This is like for you Sati fans. It's totally the wrong key. If we are going to pedal this, it works the same way as what we talked about earlier, but we have to have better control of the pedal. So if it's a fast release, we still need the fingers to stay engaged with the key long enough that the pedal can do its job, right? Learning that is just a matter of practice and listening. So how long do they need to sit there in order for the foot to do its job? How fast can the pedal move, and can we release everything else? So it's a bit of trial and error and a bit of experimentation, and figuring out as we speed up from a slow tempo where we have time. Really, we have to teach ourselves how that feels to stick for just long enough, and stick for just long enough, and stick. The more adept you get at using the pedal and making quick full pedal changes that aren't under too much stress or tension, the easier that's going to get. I'm sorry I don't have an easier answer or a quicker solution to that. It's just practice and time and listening. Yeah, Rhodesy, I'm still live. I'm going to wrap up very soon. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, as David said, that I'm just reading now, David said to Julio, if you're not already sitting on the front edge of your bench or your seat, sitting further forward gives you have more leg that can descend toward the pedal as well. So yeah, usually I sit with the bench a little close during streams, closer than I usually sit when I'm practicing, because it helps to reach everything and do everything I need to. But if I were to actually have this in an appropriate place to play, I'd be sitting on the front half of this, so maybe 6 inches of bench. I see that's cut off on the screen, but about everything is within 6 inches on the front half of the seat. That's it. No further back. So I have a whole lot of leg from this point all the way that is not in contact. That gives you a lot more of your leg is available, right? Okay. I see Bachward's Fellow tuned in. Ah, yes. Dith. Oh, let's see. Bachward's Fellow said to Dith about the children's corner. Oh, yes, I get that now. Yeah, children's corner is they're definitely not children's pieces. They're pretty challenging. Okay. I think phase-ish. You have the last question. We'll do phase-ish and Seth. Okay, those two. And Bedlington Groomer, thank you so much. Okay, going back to phase-ish question, we'll do these next two and we'll call it a day from here. So Phaser said, do you think that a quarter pedaling and half pedaling is a real advantage in situations like this? Because digital, if you let it go, it's dead. Digital is getting better at mimicking an acoustic instrument in that sense. So there are digitals out there that allow you to recapture. They're still not as fast as what an acoustic piano allows you to do, for example. But digitals are getting better at modeling that. I actually find on a digital, even if I'm playing a really nice VST that's expensive and really well designed and has all the bells and whistles, I usually find that the pedal is still not as forgiving as on an acoustic. It's still probably one of the biggest complaints I have about playing on digitals, especially if I'm playing classical rep or something like that, that too often I lift pedal and too much of it goes away, far more than if I were playing an acoustic. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that quarter and half pedal, let's put it this way. Quarter and half pedal means something very specific, and they both entail the dampers actually touching the strings and making a change. They are important, really advanced playing. What I think is even more important than that, if you're playing an acoustic, and if you can feel it on a digital, that the pedal travels a distance. And for part of the traveling distance, nothing happens. So let me try to show you that again. If I play C and the pedal is down, as I lift, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. I'm lifting very slowly. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So there was, I don't know the exact distance, but there was, let's see. Maybe a few centimeters that the pedal lifted before a change actually happens. And if we could see inside the piano, the dampers are moving, but they're not touching the strings. What's really important for us to learn is to keep the pedal, especially playing lyrical stuff, keep the pedal no further depressed then it absolutely has to be. So if I'm playing, let's go back to the Chopin that we worked on. If I can find it quickly. Okay, so there is a lot of pedaling in this prelude. So when anytime that I want to pedal, very rarely is the pedal actually all the way down. It's partially down, maybe 3/4 of the way down. And then when I change pedal, I'm only moving a minuscule amount, because moving the pedal this much gets me from no pedal to, gets me from fully sustained to no pedal. And it all happens in that tiny space. If the range of the pedal is this big, and I only need this much to make all those changes, I want to stay as close to these barriers, if you can think of it that way. I want to stay as close as I can there while I play. Because anytime the foot takes time to do something, just like the rest of the hands and the rest of the mechanism, right? So if the foot has to travel a longer distance to release, then we have to add a whole lot more time. And if as it's traveling that distance, we might not be really sure of where the release is actually going to happen. But if the foot can be so close that the most minute movement goes from sustained to released, and on all the partial releases in between, we gain a lot of control over pedaling. So a lot of digitals do this. I find that they're not as easy to feel, because we don't get the same feedback from the pedal itself like we do on an acoustic, but it's still possible. A lot of digitals, they'll sense gradations in pedal. And even if it's just an on-off pedal and it doesn't do any half pedaling, pedal on or depressed won't only be at the very bottom of the pedal. You'll be able to release up to a point, and then somewhere in the middle, it turns off. We want to find where that point is and stick closer to it, rather than having pedal all the way down and then trying to have the foot fly, bam, up and down and up and down. When we have big movements like that, it takes a lot of time. The dampers make a lot of noise when we pedal that way, and it's far more difficult to control. Yeah. Yes, I guess yes, to answer your question. Is it an advantage if a pedal has quarter pedaling and half pedaling on a digital, for example, or on an acoustic where you could almost call it like infinite gradations of pedal? Yes, because we have that ability, even if we're not using half pedaling and quarter pedaling in our playing, we have that ability to control how the pedal is working with much finer detail. Okay, last question, I think. I think it's Seth's question. Rhodesy, nice comment. Seth's question, do the pedal changes always need to catch every melody note? Because that would somewhat dictate the timing for pedal marks. No. In fact, gosh, Seth, that's a really hard question to answer in a general way, because once again, I'll use the Chopin Prelude to talk about some of that. So our melody is in our left hand. For example, here the pedal is down, and then I'm going to lift. But while this C sharp plays, the pedal was off. And then it lifts when the B is played. So down, release, on, release, on, release. So that's a really hard question to answer, because how we pedal every melody note is going to be different in every piece. It's going to be different in every phrase. Whether we need to use finger legato to connect it or not is going to be different depending on the context. And no, not every melody note will get a change in pedal. That is Sometimes they do. Sometimes we keep it very clean, and other times we don't. And it really depends on how much blur is okay. How much blur is okay for the composer in question. Here. I'm happy to blur the arpeggio up, even though that's part of the melody, and slowly release the pedal from G to F sharp here, so I don't suck the atmosphere away, if you will. This would be sucking the atmosphere away. How it all just goes, and we lose everything too quickly. But now everything is pedal, 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 off, down, off, down, pedal, 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 pedal. So, I don't know if that helped to answer that question, because it's a really convoluted, music does not give us a clear and simple answer, right? It really depends on context. And then how fast we release the pedal also depends on context and depends on how advanced of playing that we're going for. Yeah. Yes, so Bachward's fellow said ideally melody where can be connected by hands is better without pedal. I think that's a good guidepost. Yeah. I think that's a good guidepost, although I generally teach that we should have pedal on almost every note that we play, because it helps the instrument sing so much more. But pedaling every note doesn't ever mean that that we create blur. So, so we still need to connect with the fingers. Oh gosh, Bedrock and David, hello. I was just about to wrap up. Because I've been on here for 2.5 hours. Bedrock, I have a quick answer for you. I have a video, a massive hour-long video on Chopin's waltz, the A minor waltz, that's available on the channel. So I would go check that out for any specifics about measures and a whole lot of other help also. And David, we do these every 2 weeks. I start, 2.5 hours ago, depending on your time zone. So every 2 weeks, you can always feel free to tune in and jump in the chat. But yeah, I do need to wrap it up for today. So Ricardo, thank you for being here. And Julio, yeah, let's relieve that tension like we talked about and let the hand relax. And we'll build in some more expressive playing from there. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks Alexis and Seth and Bedlington Groomer and Rotzi and FaZe, Bachward's fellow. And thanks to everybody who played. Julio played today, and Antonio who sent us a question about rolling chords, and Zero who kicked us off with some Chopin Etude playing. All right. See you again in 2 weeks. I have one video submission, I believe, for 2 weeks from today. So know that there are always slots available if you'd like to submit your playing. And we have finally caught up. So I think I have one piece already scheduled, but I have a second slot open. And first come, first serve. There are directions for how to submit down below in the description. Rhodesy, if you get it to me first, yes, I'll put your recording in for the next stream. In internet privacy, I just doubled back on the Prelude to demonstrate some other stuff. We moved on from that officially a long time ago. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. See you in 2 weeks. Continue to enjoy practicing. If you haven't given that video a thumbs up, please do. I see we've gotten a lot, but please give it a thumbs up if you can. And thank you, Bedlington Groomer. I will see you all in 2 weeks or elsewhere on the channel. Practice harder, not smarter. And I'll see you later. All right.